Hey, welcome to FailCraft. I'm Hammy. It's been a while. We're back 10 days, and that's been over Gamescom. We've got a whole bunch of cards, the Gamescom cards, the most fresh and new Grand Tournament cards to talk about as of the 10th of August 2015. So if you've already seen cards, if you've seen cards over the last 10 days, take a look in the description below. We're going to put some little links there on YouTube where you can skip to either the Gamescom cards, the most recent cards, or maybe the slightly older cards from 10 or so days ago. So do not fear. We're going to go with the Gamescom cards and the most recent cards first. Jumping on in, we're going to be giving first impressions. Remember, of course, we've not seen all of the cards. When we see all the cards, we will go through them all again and try and get an idea of how that metagame is working, maybe how decks will come together. So these are first impressions with the card pool as we see at the moment. Cutpurse, rogue card, 2/2/2, solid minion. Can throw it down. It's got good health, attack, and mana cost balanced. In those regards, when this minion attacks the enemy hero, put a coin into your hand. How much is this going to be able to attack before it gets removed? That is the question. Rogues, of course, have spells they can throw around to try and keep this alive. But, of course, people are going to gun for it. Control Warrior, if I've got a Fury Warhorse, want to get rid of that. There's also minions I would probably trade it. But if you can keep Cutpurse alive against certain slow out of the decks, slow out of the blocks decks, like Paladin a bit, for example. Paladin might be dropping. There's no easy way a Paladin can remove this straight up. Even if they're going first, they might be able to do it a little bit more easily. So things that are a little bit slower, rely maybe on minions to trade, you might be able to get Cutpurse away for a quick attack. Now, if a Cutpurse gets 2 or 3 attacks in, we can somehow protect it and keep it alive. Those additional coins could be pretty nice. We'll let the rogue ramp things out earlier. So, initial impression of Cutpurse, if we can find a way of making it work, keeping it alive, letting it attack the hero maybe once or twice, it's going to be paying itself back and even more besides. So, an interesting card. I look forward to seeing how that fits in with the rest of the expansion. And we will drop one in, drop one out. Next is Dreadsteed. Dreadsteed is, of course, a Warlock card. Now, this is kind of a loop until silenced card. If we take a little look at it, 4 mana, 1/1. Dreadsteed, when it dies, you summon a Dreadsteed. And then when that size dies, you summon a Dreadsteed, and you get the picture. Over and over and over it goes. What this means is that when you drop a Dreadsteed, unless your opponent somehow silences it, it's going to keep coming back and back and back. And now remember, with the Warlocks, we've got interesting things we can use. We could perhaps buff it. You know, it could be a constant power overwhelming. You could use it continuously to trade and trade and trade against your opponent's little minions. There are maybe things that would benefit from it being sacrificed. So Rajanog says in chat live on Twitch, this is a strange card. It is a bit of a strange card, but let's take a look at the other Warlock cards. This is the kind of card I look at and think, right, how does it work with existing cards where you could power overwhelming it? You can trade it away, it dies, and then it comes straight back. So it could be there. If your opponent kills it, it comes straight back. You're not going to be able to build up loads of Dreadsteeds, but how can you makes Anub'arak playable? Says Rajanog. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to have to look up Anub'arak again, just to remember what it's looked like. And we see Anub'arak is, at the end of each turn, destroy this minion if it's your only one. Aha, yes. So for 6 mana, 9 attack and 9 health, Anub'arak could sort of stay alive with it. Very interesting combo there. Maybe people will try and sneak a few Anub'araks out. You won't destroy it because you should always have a Dreadsteed on the table unless your opponent silences it. So well spotted, Raj. I very much like that combo. Other ways you can buff Dreadsteed. Let's see what other Warlock cards turn up. So nice that it infinitely loops. How can you take advantage of that effect? As Rajanog has pointed out, Anub'arak is a very good example. Lancebearer, we've got a neutral minion here. Give a friendly minion to attack for a battle cry. I like that. You drop this guy in the early game, 1 attack, 2 health. Not the greatest stats, but you can then go ahead and buff something else. This gives you kind of a Shattered Sun Cleric type of effect of more for less. That 2 attack will let you use a cheaper minion and trade it against a larger minion, or perhaps if you're trying to do a bit of rushing, let you put a bit of extra pressure on. So a perfectly serviceable common, maybe a little combo more with other cards that we take a look at. This is an interesting card, Astral Communion. Now, there were some debates as to the text of this, as to how it works. Gaining 10 mana crystals and then discarding your hand. So, as far as I understand it, big welcome to Castarella joining us in chat. Good to have you with us. Astral Communion, as far as I understand it, this is a straight gain of 10 mana crystals and a straight discard of your hand. And discarding of the hand and gaining those 10 mana crystals, it's kind of extreme ramp. course, this is a druid card, if I didn't mention before. So how can we use this? Well, there have been people trying to put together decks of kind of relying that you're going to get Astral Communion out. Now, if you get it out, sure, on turn 4 you could be, well, going absolutely nuts and playing all kinds of big and nasty minions. I don't think it's 10 mana for 1 turn, I just think it's a straight up 10 mana, and all kinds of things like that. So Astral Communion, you've seen people putting together these ramp decks. I don't think it's you can't really gain 10 mana crystals just for a turn and lose them, so it's a full top up. And then can you ramp with it? Yes. Discarding your hand, well, you want to play this turn 4 and have a pretty empty hand. If you're not drawing those Astral Communions, it then becomes a little bit tricky. So there are ways that you can play it. It feels like a fun card a bit at the moment, unless there are other druid cards that can go with it. Rushing with a bunch of stuff in the early game, or having stuff that you don't want to discard. But of course, if you have to discard your hand and you've got all of your big nasty finishes in that you want to be ramping into, then you've got problems. So even on Hearthstone and other popular deck sites, other deck sites are available. There's lots of cards that kind of decks that are trying to put together a big ramp. So will it work? Maybe other druid cards will make this a bit nicer to use. Big welcome to Velopi as well. Good to see you too. That aside, I think we're just going to have to see how it goes. That one, you can see how it could be used, whether it's going to be wholly unviable or not. It really depends how much druid stuff I can play in the early game and how I can keep my hand sort of relatively small and hope that I'm not throwing in away anything too valuable that I might want to be grabbing it. Ragnarok asks, does druid have enough card draw to get tempo regained? That is a good question. You lose, of course, the tempo that Ragnarok is referring to by discarding your hand, unless you've been able to, in a really optimal situation, play that entire hand. So you have a hand of 0 on turn 4 as a druid. Could be a tough order, particularly if you're playing big minions, or you're packing big minions in your deck that you want to ramp into. We will see on that one. I think it doesn't scream to me amazing. Screams to me fun to start with, but could be good, could be wrong. There are certainly ways it can be used. Warhorse Trainer, well, paladin because of its beautiful golden border. Your silver hand recruits have 1 attack. Now I'm just sitting here and there are other cards grand tournament wise where you're just like, paladin silver hand recruits, it's going to be a thing. I can't remember the other card from earlier for the grand tournament, but it was something along the lines of summoning 1/1 tokens, or so. I think it lets any class summon a silver hand recruit. So if you're on YouTube, you're going to remind me as soon as I finish this stream or video. I'm instantly going to remember, I'm sure. But it feels as though, as well as muster for battle, there are increased ways of getting lots of silver hand recruits, little token minions on the table, grand tournament, jousting, all that kind of thing. Paladins feel as though they get quite a shot of love in this expansion. And giving your silver hand recruits 1 attack, remember, of course, we've already got the Quartermaster. The Quartermaster gives your silver hand recruits +2/+2. If you get the Warhorse Trainer in, somehow, if I place a silver hand recruit turn 2, then it has +1 attack. If I'm playing Warhorse Trainers and Quartermasters, suddenly we've got this deck where Muster for Battle, Warhorse Trainer, Quartermaster, your silver hand recruits are just going absolutely ballistic. And this minion in itself is not bad. 3 mana, 2 attack, 4 health. Slightly lower attack, slightly high health. You can be using this to trade, maybe chip away at minions. If someone's rushing you, you can use it to clear early game aggression. I quite like Warhorse Trainer, and for 3 mana, that's giving you a really nice shot earlier in the game. And if you're waiting for a Quartermaster and you've got your silver hand recruits on the table with a muster for battle, or just using your hero power, tap tap tap, that is going to be pretty nice indeed. So that card screams to me, yes, let's find ways of making a big and nasty paladin, and hopefully the meter cycle is not drowning your ears too much. I love the look of Warhorse Trainer. Let's see how we can use and abuse that one in deck construction. Flash Heal, priest card. I used to be a priest back in the vanilla days of WoW. Healing in Molten Core. Flash Heal was close to my heart. Big aggro, but a lovely heal for a very efficient mana cost. In fact, you pretty much as Heast had a 1 button. Heast, priest heal, makes Heast somehow. Flash Heal, Flash Heal, Flash Heal, Flash Heal. There we go. 1 mana, giving the nice mana efficiency of World of Warcraft again, and then 5 health. So top up a big minion, top up your hero. Will you sacrifice deck slots in a priest, the Chinese, Japanese priest, the tempo priest variant, which are already very, very efficient at the moment for a flash heal? No. Could there be other healing related archetypes that come up? Could this be useful in a different context? Remember, of course, that with a Orkanai Soul Priest, deal 5 damage. Deal 5 damage for 1 mana. All of your cards that restore health deal health damage instead. So that's very nasty indeed. Remember, with your Mind Blasts, with your other things, suddenly Shadow Priest. Let's look for a Flash Heal and a Shadow Priest with an Orkanai Soul Priest. 2 mana, 10 damage with an Orkanai Soul Priest on the table. It's a nasty, nasty combination. You can see people having some fun with Flash Heal. So let's go and build our priest deck. The mana efficiency of that makes it awesome. Living Roots for your druids. Deal 2 damage for 1 mana. Not bad. A nice little early game zap. Remember, of course, otherwise you're waiting for like Wrath, which is 1 and draw a card, or 3. It's a bit of a different option. Gives you that 2 damage to 1 minion, or summoning 2 1/1 saplings. Now that is not necessarily a bad thing. Those saplings you can be using to trade things away, ping away things with like bubbles and things like that. Try and get some early game trades on the table. Could give you buff targets. Lots of things that could do. So is it going to replace a Wrath immediately? Probably not. However, there may be other options to use it with. So again, it's one of those, let's wait and see. It's not going to be condemned, it's not going to be universally praised, but it's some more early game control and utility for druids. And druids, of course, bar like Wrath and face trading of minions and using Claw as a hero power, do tend to have a little bit of a slow time in the early game. So more early game options for druids. I'm sure druids will be happy with that one. Fist of Jaraxxus. This is an interesting card. Remember, as Warlock, of course, you have things like Soulfire and various things where you discard cards, of course, and then that becomes a bit of a disadvantage. You don't want to be discarding cards. Fist of Jaraxxus, if you discard it, you actually get its effect for free. Effectively discarding it means that you're playing it, you're getting the same effect as you would if you actually just played it for 4 mana, but you don't have to pay the mana. So deal 4 damage to a random enemy. This is like a flame cannon type effect, but a random enemy rather than a random enemy minion could mean that you do it to the enemy hero. I need to double check my Hearthstone card decks, but I do believe that's the case. So you'd rather discard this card. May attack a minion and be totally wasted, similar to good old flame cannon. If your flame cannon randomly attacks something that's got a divine shield on or something. But of course, like flame cannon, you want to try and target this. If there's the enemy hero, then naturally it does 4 damage to the enemy hero. If there's an enemy hero and a minion, then maybe it will do damage to that minion. If there's a load of minions out on the table for your opponent, it's a little bit random. So again, can you find ways to discard Fist of Jaraxxus? It's alright, might be a fun card unless other cards play into its favour. Now this I like. Shamans have got a real sprinkling of Hearthstone magic dust. Now there's some beautiful Shaman cards. If you've not seen the earlier Shaman cards that have been released since the Grand Tournament unveiling later in July, they have got some really good early game minions. They've got some nice additional totems, and then they have Charged Hammer. Just take a look at this. Now, 2 attack, 4 durability. You can keep on swinging with that. It's going to be absolutely great. Quite an expensive weapon. It's falling into that kind of Death's Bite warrior slot of 4 mana. But Death Rattle, your hero power becomes deal 2 damage. Suddenly Shamans have got a double fire blast, or whatever it's called, the mage power, and that is really nice. I think that as a Shaman you're going to be weakening targets. If you, pardon me, want to be dropping minions and totems and so forth, if you manage to get your board full of totems in the early game as a Shaman, or these new Shaman minions, then you can actually start, just instead of casting totems with your hero power, be zapping away at various targets. So Charged Hammer is kind of like an elemental Shaman of Warcraft and World of Warcraft. If you spec yourself elemental, you're almost like Thor going around and zapping around with lightning, and that's what this Charged Hammer makes me think of it. I wonder if it's going to have slightly Thor-esque flavour text. But like this, gives Shaman more ability to try and grab table control, weaken minions without using the big spells. As Shaman, if you're using your big nuke spells, you're can't really just weaken things in a manner efficient way. You've either got to throw down a lightning storm and try and clear the entire side of the table, or you've got to be using big things like Crackle that generally tend to do over damage, waste that damage and efficiency on certain minions. So the 2 ping for a Shaman is quite nice. I think we're going to see people using this card, or at the very least trying to fit it into some decks, but like it, I think it's going to get used. Now we have Alexstrasza's Champion. Well, warriors definitely use Alexstrasza a lot, so Alexstrasza's Champion being a warrior card kind of makes sense. If you're holding a dragon, gain 1 attack and charge. Okay, so warriors, I may pack Ysera. I may well pack Alexstrasza, so Alexstrasza champion makes sense. And other warriorish type dragons aren't too bad. This gives us more of an early game power. So 2/2/3 is a really nice solid minion anyway, but if we have that dragon, we're going to be 3/3 and charge. Absolutely brilliant. Suddenly on turn 2 we've got a 3 attack, 3 health charging minion, which is really strong. Dragon warrior, sounds like something out of Kung Fu Panda. In fact, I think maybe it is the Dragon Warrior in Kung Fu Panda. Gonna have to look that up. Our hero in Kung Fu Panda becomes the Dragon Warrior, Mr. Pandaria. Just saying. 3 attack and 3 health with charge is really, really nice for a 2-drop minion. So if you have dragons in your warrior deck, then who knows what's going to be happening. And a big welcome, Erdem. Welcome to Erdem Law 1, 2, 3. Good to have you with us, and everyone else, of course, on stream. So I like Alexstrasza's champion. Is it going to fit into a control warrior at the moment? Maybe not. It's not a Grim Patron card. Grim Patrons aren't packing a whole bunch of dragons at the moment. But if you're trying to make sort of a weapons base, maybe a more aggressive dragon-style warrior, I think that if people can make a deck in which this makes sense, at the very least it's going to be a fun, specific deck card for, you know, maybe a new invented Dragon Warrior type deck. At most, who knows, with other cards that are released in the Grand Tournament, it could be very cool indeed. So, wait and see, but feeling optimistic about that. Alrighty, next up we have Grand Crusader. And for Grand Crusader, it's a neutral minion. We have 6 mana, 5 attack, 5 health, so that's broadly speaking what we call quite solid. Not too bad. Add a random paladin card to your hand. In Arena, this is wonderful. A free card. Sometimes in Arena, anything that is just going to let you grab new and additional cards is always very, very good. So you can get a free card, anything that's 2 for the price of 1, anything that summons a minion. A random paladin card in your hand in Arena is probably only going to help you out. If you're playing Pally, may or may not actually help you. It's a paladin card, not necessarily a minion or spell. So who knows what this could be. It could be great, it could be terrible. Paladin cards on the whole, paladin class specific ones aren't awful, but there could still be some stinkers to find a point in it that you could draw out. So we'll have to do it. So Erdem asks, do you play music on stream? We occasionally do Fun Fridays or a fun stream where in that case we play music and you guys can choose the music that we play, but the rest of the time we don't. Grand Crusader, back to that. It's okay, is my analysis. It will be great in Arena. It's a very solid card to drop on turn 6, and that random paladin card will most probably help you out rather than hinder you. Will it be good in any other deck? There are other minions I'd rather play for 6 mana. To see. Let's go for some Confuse. I love this. I'm just trying to work out, to be honest with you, exactly how it's going to be used. So, Confused. Swap the attack and health of all minions. How could this be used and abused by a priest? Well, if it was in a paladin or something like that, then you've instantly got Consecrate, like that AoE damage. So if our opponent is coming at us with giants that are all sort of equal health and attack, so if you've got things with if we as a priest are playing low attack high health minions and play Confuse, it will make all of our minions that much more scary. And a big welcome to Rampant Jesus on stream. Good to have you with us. That is an awesome name. I just imagine you know, the memes you see online of, like, you know, Jesus on a white horse or something like that. That's Rampant Jesus to me. I do like this card. I think it's fun. I agree with you there, Jesus. I'm just trying to think of how you could use it in an effective way. So you have things like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Snapjaw, the 2 attack, 7 health, or some thereabouts type minion. So if you have a bunch of those down and suddenly Confuse, you could have some slightly janky, weird and wonderful decks. Remember, of course, priests also have Inner Fire and Divine Spirit. You can double the health of a minion, and then suddenly you can swap the attack and health of all minions. Deathlord Priest, says Rajanog. Well, Rajanog makes a great point. That makes your Deathlord from 2 attack 8 health to 8 attack 2 health. Now remember that you normally play a Deathlord to delay your opponent as a priest until you can get yourself set up or doing really, really nasty things. Yeah, so remember that when a Deathlord dies, of course, your opponent pulls a random card from their deck into play, and that can be very nasty indeed. Deathlord is such a good card when my enemy uses it, says Erdem. Erdem, I feel your pain when we pick your own arenas, and inevitably a Deathlord comes up. Everyone likes picking Deathlords because you guys pick. It's all good. And Deathlord, inevitably, whenever I play it, it's just really, really, really painful. So yeah, Deathlord is great when my opponent plays it. That's Deathlord in a nutshell. But yeah, Confuse. How will it work? I can think of ways. Morgushan Warden. Any word on when we can open the Grand Tournament pack, says Jesus. Before in August was when the expansion was meant to be released. Given that they're releasing cards at such a rate of knots, it's the 10th. I'd be very surprised if it's not released before the end of August. They've said August. We'll see. Remember, there's 130 or so cards. Very good spot by Rampant Jesus, spotting the Capital Wasteland map in the background. I'm particularly impressed that you've done that because the light isn't quite so good. You can see the capital the capital. Nicely done. Looking forward to Fallout 4. But anyway, back to Hearthstone. Away with Confuse, and we will see if that can be used. There are fun ways, but they're kind of, I'm going to say, gimmicky for the time being. You need to build a deck around it. As we've said, the Deathlords, the Morgushan Warden, as Reginald also mentioned. We're going to have to do a little Vault Boy. Mate. Muckless Champion, a neutral for you. Inspire, of course, Inspire being the new, the Grand Tournament keyword. Now, just as a real quick summary, Inspire means whenever you use your hero power, this happens. So, remember we mentioned earlier about Silverhand recruits and the abilities of those so far. Erdem asks, what are your favourite 3 cards in the new expansion? I'm going to go over that at the end because I want to go over all of these to start with. Give your other minions 1/1. So if you're dropping that turn 5, let's say I'm a paladin and I've not actually managed to fish out my Quartermaster, as well as the Warhorse Champion, Warhorse Commander, that's what it was called from earlier, that battle cries and buffs Silverhand recruits. I could take any bunch of tokens and just by using my hero power give them 1/1. So this gives other decks that use tokens, as well as, of course, the Silverhand Knights of a Paladin, the ability to just buff and buff and buff. So if I don't draw my Quartermaster and I drop one of these, as a Paladin, I'll quite happily just press Silverhand Recruit, hero power, and summon those up. I could be using Violet Teacher, which, whenever I cast a spell, summons a token. There's other ways this can be used. I like the feel of this. The health is a little bit low. Big thanks to Half Pawn for these card images, by the way. Go and check them out. They're absolutely splendid and wonderful. Hence the slightly bigger heart drop there, I think. But that effect is quite nice. You can play this, yes, it's weak, the health is low. If you can throw it up behind a tank or something, that would be ideal. Let's see. People will try and find a way to make that work. Rampant says, I sent some nasty combos on the way with Inspire. I've seen some nasty combos already with Inspire. I'm going to start probably in the next few weeks making Theorycraft deck videos where we can take a look at some of these cards and see maybe how they could work as we see more cards. The Clockwork Knight, this is a little bit of an older one. Probably, I think this is from maybe the very end of July, of course, with the 10th of August now, playing a bit of catch up here. But I like it. 5/5/5, it reminds me of the Priest mech, where you've got a solid set of 5 stats. You can play that card. It's a nice solid minion giving a friendly mech 1/1. This is okay. It's not like the +5 health of the Priest bot, but another mech being buffed a little bit is all good if you're playing a mech deck. Clockwork Knight is neutral and it is splashable, and its stats are solid. It's a good way of following through on early game mech combos and gives a little bonus mech as well. Not a huge bonus, but a bonus nonetheless. So could be played. Certainly viable. Interesting. So, Anub'arak, is he a rogue legendary? I'm guessing he is. I think that's the rogue border. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. So, 9 mana, 8 attack, 4 health. Initial thoughts, very low health. Let's see if his effect makes it worth it. Ooh, okay. There we go. Death Rattle. Return this to your hand and summon a 4/4 Nerubian. So if any of you ever raided Nax, Anub'arak was, I think, wasn't he? Return this to your hand and summon a 4/4 Nerubian. So you can summon a Nerubian, you can replay Anub'arak, summon a Nerubian, replay Anub'arak. If you find ways of killing Anub'arak yourself, you can summon that Nerubian. So as soon as a Anub'arak is on the table, if you can keep him there, no matter how many, if your opponent destroys him to get rid of that 8 health, the Nerubian is going to pop. And at that late stage in the game, how easy is it going to be for your opponent to actually silence that card? That is the question. If you're playing a rogue and Anub'arak comes out late game and you survive to the late game, imagine if you drop a Tinker's sharp sword oil or something as well, if you're playing that kind of thing. Anub'arak's a nasty little finisher. And will your opponent still have a silence by this stage? Maybe they won't. So for that very reason, it has potential. It's just whether a rogue is going to... This is a late game rogue. Now, Tinker's Sharpsword or rogues, weapons-based rogues, which control in the early game, and then you're throwing down the minions, the Tinker's Oil, swinging away with your weapon in the late game for the big burst damage for the finish. That is a well-tried and tested existing deck type. Now, this is a little different. You could splash this in that kind of deck. It feels as though that this is could be used somehow in a control rogue that keeps you to the late game, and then Anub'arak is your win condition. Your opponent runs out of cards and then you get Anub'arak down, or your opponent runs out of silences or control options, down goes Anub'arak, and then when Anub'arak is down, unless your opponent can silence it, then it's just going to win you the game, because if they kill it, the Nerubians will just overswarm. As Radranorg says, Anub'arak is a must silence, and I agree with that, but the question is, what kind of rogue deck is going to set that up best? It's like a control rogue. Control warrior obviously keeps the whole table under control to the late game and then wins through with those minions. It's kind of like this sort of control rogue idea, saying, Anub'arak, what other minions can you put that flourish in the late game? Rogue already has fun in the late game with the sort of Tinker's combo. Rampant Jesus says, I think that'll be a tough card to counter. I think it's going to be a question of how you set it up in a deck best, and whether you're taking away from the existing deck theme. So I'm thinking Tinkers, I'm thinking that kind of control rogue that then wins in the mid to late game with these kind of cards, hoping that your opponent does have a silence or a solution, but feels viable. I like that card. That's a nice legendary for rogues. Rogues will definitely try and have a tinker with that one. Here we go for a druid one, Aviana. Now this is pretty nasty. I need to try and find the definition of Aviana. There was a bit of a card clarification somewhere on Aviana, just in terms of how she works. As you can see, she's a late game drop, and these cards you may have noticed with Anub'arak and also with Aviana. How about these legendaries, these class-based legendaries that are trying to be a bit of a shot in the arm for later game decks? Now, I'm wondering if with the other Grand Tournament cards that we're seeing so far, they're giving ways for early to mid-game decks to, or mid-game decks, mid to late game decks to survive more in the early game. I'm just getting this bit of a little Spidey sense theme from some of these cards, because we've also got these legendaries that look real nice, but they're late game and you've got to survive to play these to make them worthy. And if you think of Neptulon from the last set, Neptulon gives you all of those Murlocs, which as a Shaman in the late game gives you a second wind, another burst of speed, another bunch of things you can do when you've got to that late game stage, beyond sort of throw big legendaries at each other and see who falls over first. Because if you're playing late game versus late game decks, or if you're playing control warrior decks, or if you're playing any kind of decks that get to the late game, and you don't like rushes, then you need ways for later game decks to be able to survive, number one, and then two, other options for them to give themselves another shot in the arm in the late game. This is where Aviana comes in. Your minions cost 1. Now, I think it was clarified, I think I saw it on Hearthstone or maybe one of the Twitters, that if you play Thaurissan, then your minions do cost 0. So it does reduce the cost. So Thaurissan can give you 3 minions. So you could play Aviana, then Thaurissan, then have 3 minions in your hand. Now, Aviana, as you can see, 5 attack, 5 health, that will get zapped very fast. You need to play Aviana, and then when Aviana is played, you need it to survive for at least 1 turn, unless you can ramp into it earlier with something like Innovate, or unless you could play that crazy druid card from earlier that gives you 10 mana and play Aviana. if Aviana doesn't survive, you're not going to get the real benefit of that. If you play this on turn 10, pardon me, you're only going to have one minion that you can play. That could be a giant legendary. But how do you protect Aviana to keep this alive? That is the question. How do you keep her alive for a turn? I'm assuming it's a her, some kind of harpy. And how do you then build a deck? Now obviously druids, we know that late game druids have got loads of big nasty minions, and if you're playing a ramp or if you're playing anything like that, Aviana can work. So how do you build a lot of ramp druids or a lot of druid decks, try and keep the table under control? We've seen this double combo, Savage Raw, Force of Nature, trying to get that off a couple of times with Thorson. Aviana could be your, but again, like Neptune, like Anub'arak, it's giving you this kind of second wind in the late game where you can jump on in and do, have almost another flood of plays, flood of minions. So that's quite interesting. Like